In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonam la, shangju badu dagni kapsuchi, dagi jinso ki pe sonamgi, drola penshir sangye jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem centam she dewadang dewe gurdang dempar jurchi. Dognal dang donal gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dognal me pe dewa dang mi drawar jorchi. Ne ring jak dang ni dang drawe dang namla ne par jorchi. Om Vajrasattva Samaya. Help to protect my vow, to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Drista Dredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sitsa Me Sitsantriya Kuru Hong Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sara Tada Gata Bajra Mame Munsa Bajri Bhava Mahasamaya Satwaha Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Drista Dredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sitsa Me Sitsantriya Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sara Tada Gata Bajra Mame Munsa Bajri Bhava Maha Samaya Satwaha. Likewise be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me, completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food, and drink peacefully, enjoy it, and be satisfied, so that all obstacles may be destroyed. be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated. Thank you very much. So we've been talking about the life of the Buddha through the Lalitavistara Sutra, the play in full, and we continue with that. We are seeing that we're in chapter 15, and the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, as he's referred to at this stage of his life, the Bodhisattva is preparing to leave home. And there is a dynamic that is going on, and we're being able to be witness to this dynamic and see what is happening between the Bodhisattva and our God beings and the king and his wife. So we're seeing all this. Chapter 14, where the dreams of his father and of his wife and of the Bodhisattva himself. And now the gods are engaging a little bit in this conversation. So if we have four of us here this evening, so if we can all take turns reading. So what we're going to do, what I'd like to do, is read up to 15.51 or through 1551. So this is a very long chapter, so I'm breaking it up into sections that seem to be part of a conversation, each one of these sections. So we'll read these few pages, and then we can have a discussion, and then we can go on and read the next group if we have time for that. So if that's okay, we'll proceed with that. So if we can begin by reading that. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I guess is the first thing. And anybody on YouTube watching, if you have comments or questions and you want to shoot us email, we'll be more than glad to respond to those as soon as we can. Okay, so if Kunga doesn't have anything right now, or Brendan or Zara, then we'll continue on. Okay. All right, so Kunga, why don't you, if you don't mind, please read the first page. So that'll go through 15.5. And then Brendan, if you will read the next section, and 15.12 is a long section and goes over to the next page. So if you will read all of 15.12, that would be great. And then Zara, if you will read from 15.13 to the next page to 15 through 15.20, and then I'll read from 15.21 down through 15.28 on the following page. And then after that, Kunga, if you will pick that up and continue reading. And then after that will be Brendan. And then after that will be Zara. And then after that will be me. And so we'll continue on until we get to the end of 15.51. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thank you. All right, so Kunga, when you're ready, please.
Chapter 15, Leaving Home. Monks, in the meantime, the Bodhisattva thought to himself, it would not be right if I did not share my plans with the great king Siddhana and simply left home without his permission. He would be very ungrateful of me. So that night, when everything became quiet, he left his own quarters and entered the quarters of King Siddhana. As soon as the Bodhisattva stepped foot on the palace floor, the entire palace became illuminated with light. The king woke up, and when he saw the light, he promptly asked his chamberlain, did the sun rise? It is such a beautiful light. His chamberlain replied, no, my lord, it is still the middle of the night. He continued, my lord, the light of the sun causes trees and walls to cast shadows. It torments and overheats the body. Also, swans, peacocks, parrots, cuckoos, and wild ducks call out at the time of dawn. However, your majesty, this light is lovely and pleasant. It is soothing, auspicious, and does not burn. It penetrates trees and walls and casts no shadows. Someone with great qualities must have arrived here. The king, worried, looked around and saw the pure being with his eyes like lotuses. He tried to get up from his bed, but did not succeed. The noble one, with pure heart, then felt respect for his father. Standing in front of the king, he said, "My lord, now the time is right for me to leave home. Please do not hinder me and don't be distraught. My king, may you, my family, and the people of the kingdom forgive me."
The king replied with tears filling his eyes, "What will it take for you to change your mind? Will you ask me for a boon? Tell me, I will give you anything. I am yours, and you can have the palace, the servants, and this whole kingdom." Then, in a sweet voice, the Bodhisattva replied, "My lord, I wish for 4 boons. Please grant them to me. If you are able to give them to me, you will have power over me. You will always see me here at home, and I will not depart. I want, my lord, to be unharmed by old age, to retain my fine complexion and youth forever, to be healthy and without disease, and to have infinite life without death ever coming." When the king heard these words, he felt extremely sad. "My son, you are asking for the impossible. I am powerless here. Even the sages who live for eons are not beyond degeneration and the dreads of sickness, old age, and dying. My lord, if you cannot give me these 4 boons, freedom from misfortune and the terrors of sickness, old age, and dying, then I request of you another boon. Please listen, your majesty. I wish that after I die, I will not have to take rebirth again." When the king heard these words from the best among men, he diminished his longing, let go of his attachment for his son, and said, "Then go and benefit and liberate beings. I rejoice in that. May all your wishes be fulfilled." Monks, then the Bodhisattva left and went to his own residence, where he lay down on his bed. No one had even noticed that he had left. Monks, at daybreak, King Suddhodana gathered the entire Sakya clan and announced, "The prince wants to abandon his home. What shall we do?" The Sakyas replied, "Your Majesty, let us guard him. There are many of us in the Sakya clan, and he is alone. He will not be able to leave home." Thereafter, the Sakyas and King Suddhodana placed 500 young men by the eastern city gate to guard the Bodhisattva. All the men were armed, trained in combat, skilled in archery and javelin throwing, and were as strong as powerful wrestlers. In order to further guard the Bodhisattva, each of the young Sakya men had 500 chariots at their disposal, and along with each chariot were 500 infantrymen. Likewise, they placed 500 young men by the southern, western, and northern city gates to guard the Bodhisattva. All the men were armed, trained in combat, skilled in archery and javelin throwing, and were as strong as powerful wrestlers. In order to guard the Bodhisattva, each of the young Sakya men had 500 chariots at their disposal, and along with each chariot were 500 infantrymen.
The elders of the Sakya clan, both male and female, were also placed everywhere at the road intersections, junctions, and many highways in order to guard the Bodhisattva. Even King Suddhodana kept watch at the palace gate, accompanied by 500 young Sakyas mounted on elephants and horses. Mahaprajapita Gautami said to her servants, "Light bright lamps and fasten all jewels to the peak of the banners. Hang garlands of pearls and illuminate the entire place. Play music, sing songs, and stay awake on alert through the night. Guard the prince so that he cannot leave without anybody knowing. Arm yourselves, carrying in your hands weapons, swords, lances, bows, arrows, and 2-pointed spears. To guard our beloved prince, everyone must be on high alert. First, shut all the doors, then lock them tight. Place door bolts firmly across the door panels. Unless you must, do not open any door, otherwise this noble being might escape. Adorn yourself with necklaces of jewels and pearls. Wear flower ornaments, half-moon ornaments, and chains. Adorn yourselves with belts, rings, earrings. Take care to fasten your anklets well. Should this benefactor of humans and gods, who acts like a proud elephant, try to escape in a hasty manner, you should confront him in such a way that no harm is done to him. You girls with lances in your hands who surround the bed of the pure being, you must not slip into laziness, but watch him with eyes like a butterfly in order to guard the prince. Adorn this palace with bejeweled lattices and take up your flutes, play them to your fullest. Protect the stainless being through the night."
Keep each other awake and do not rest. Otherwise, he may certainly leave his home behind, abandoning the kingdom and all his subjects. If he were to leave his home, then the royal palace would become a place with no joy. The continuity of the royal lineage, which has endured for so long, would become interrupted. Monks, at that point, the 28 great Yaksa generals, such as Panchika, met with the 500 sons of Hariti and voiced their concern. Friends, tonight the Bodhisattva will leave his home, so you should delight in making offerings to him. Likewise, the 4 great kings who had entered the Adavati palace told the great gathering of Yaksas, friends, tonight the Bodhisattva will leave his home. You must help him leave by carrying the hooves of his fine horse with your hands. The gathering of Yaksas responded, hard as Vajra and indestructible, with a body as powerful as Narayana's, diligent and strong, this perfect man cannot be moved. Although great Meru, the foremost mountain, may be lifted and held up in the sky, no one can lift the mountain of a victor's qualities, founded on merit and wisdom. Vajrayana said, the for people bloated with pride, this teacher will be heavy. For those who are loving and respectful, he will be light. If from your heart you devote yourself to him with respect, you will find him as light as a tuft of cotton is to birds. I will walk in front while you carry his horse. When the Bodhisattva leaves, we shall gather vast amounts of merit. Monks, then Shakya, Lord of the gods, spoke to the gods in the heaven of the 33. Friends, tonight the Bodhisattva will leave his home, so you should delight in making offerings to him. The god Santamati replied, I will cause all men, women, and children in the city of Kapilavastu to fall asleep. The god Lalitavistara offered, I will silence all sounds from horses, elephants, donkeys, camels, cows, buffaloes, women, men, boys, and girls. Then the god Vayumati volunteered, I will construct in midair a fabulous road, 7 chariots wide, flanked on both sides by jeweled platforms, blazing with light of sunstone gems, shaded with raised parasols, flags, and banners, and strewn with various flowers and scents from incense burners of various fragrances. On this road, the Bodhisattva will set forth.
Then the king of the elephants, named Aravana, spoke, upon my trunk I will erect a mansion 32 leagues tall. In that mansion, divine maidens can assemble to serve and venerate the Bodhisattva by making music, singing songs, and playing instruments. Then Sakra, Lord of the gods, himself said, I will open the gates and show him the path. Next, the guard Dhamakaran said, I will cause the retinue of consorts to look unappealing. Then the god Sanokadaka spoke, I will help the Bodhisattva to rise from his bed. Finally, the Naga king Varuna, Manasvin, Sagara, Anavapta, Nanda, Upananda spoke. We, for our part, will produce cloud banks of sandalwood and let a rain of sandalwood powder descend as offerings to the Bodhisattva. Monks, then all the gods, Nagas, Yaksas, and Gandharas set out to do what they had promised. In the meantime, the Bodhisattva's mind was on the Dharma. He was resting comfortably in the music hall, surrounded by his ladies. As he reflected on the conduct of past Buddhas in a way to benefit all sentient beings, he was thinking about 4 aspiration prayers that he had formed in the past. Previously, I wished to become a self-appearing Lord and pursue omniscience. At that time, I donned the armor of the following 4-fold resolve. First, I have seen how sentient beings suffer, so may I free and liberate those who are bound to the world and caught in the prison of cyclic existence. May I liberate sentient beings from the tight shackles and chains of craving. Such was his first aspiration prayer from the past. Next, he thought of his second aspiration prayer from the past. May I shine the light of Dharma for those who are thrown deep into the darkness of great ignorance within the world. For the people whose eyes are obscured by cataract of ignorance, who lack the eye of wisdom, and who are blind with ignorance and delusion. May I raise the lamp of wisdom, which destroys the darkness for those who are blinded by ignorance. May I apply the medicine of 3 gateways to liberation, to remedy that employs means, the remedy that employs means, wisdom and knowledge. May I remove the darkness of ignorance and all cataracts and faults of dullness, in this way purify the wisdom eye.
Then the Bodhisattva thought of his third aspiration prayer from the past. Alas, this world has raised the banner of pride and egotism. It is obsessed with clinging to I and mine. People's minds grasp at the self, and false notions of the self distort their views. May I bring down this banner of pride that thinks I am by showing them the noble path. Finally, the Bodhisattva thought of his fourth aspiration prayer from the past. Alas, this world is not at peace because of the self. The world is continually disturbed and is like a tangled mass of cords. Beings come and go. They always move and circle back and forth between this world and the next. Their spinning around knows no end and resembles a firebrand circle. May I show them the Dharma of tranquility, which brings fulfillment through knowledge. Right then the god Dharmakaran and the gods of the pure realms made the retinue of consorts appear unappealing. After the gods had revealed the consorts' unpleasant and unattractive features, they took position in the sky and uttered the following verses. The gods, who have great magical powers, spoke to the one with elongated eyes like a blooming lotus. How can you be so delighted when living amid a cemetery? Inspired by the lords of gods, immediately the Bodhisattva looked around and examined the retinue of consorts. Seeing that they had become repulsive, he thought, it is true, I live amid a cemetery. When the Bodhisattva looked at the entire retinue of women, he saw that some had garments that had slipped off, some had disheveled hair, and some had their jewelry in disarray. Others had lost their head ornaments, some had ugly shoulders, while some had uncovered arms and legs. Some had repulsive expressions, while the eyes of others were crossed. Some were drooling, and others were snoring.
Some were laughing wildly, some were coughing, and others were prattling incoherently. Some others were gnashing their teeth, and the complexion of others had changed. Some of the women had unpleasant features, such as arms that were too long. Some tossed their feet around. Some had their heads uncovered, while the heads of others were covered. The facial features of some had changed. The bodies of some looked awful, and some were even lying naked. Some were hunched over and making gargling sounds. Some, still holding clay kettle drums, were twisting their bodies and heads. Some of the women held their instruments, such as lutes and 3-string lutes. Others were grinding their flutes with their teeth, making crushing noises. Some were playing kampalas, nakulas, and sampas whose resonance boxes had been removed. Some had their eyes closed, some had them open, some were rolling their eyes. Some of the women were also lying with their mouths agape. The Bodhisattva looked at the retinue of consorts who were lying there on the floor, looking utterly revolting, and he had the impression that he was indeed in a cemetery. On the topic, it said, seeing this, the protector of the world felt upset. With an outpouring of compassion exclaimed, "Ah, this gathering is so miserable. How could I find delight in the assembly of the demonesses?" Flawed and obscured with delusion is the judgment of he who thinks that worthless sense pleasures are meaningful, like a bird caught in a cage. One never regains one's freedom. Then the Bodhisattva examined his retinue of women by means of this gateway to the light of Dharma. Next, with words spoken out of great compassion, he lamented sentient beings. These childish beings are killed, like condemned at the scaffold. These childish beings are filled with desire, like fools who are attracted to a ceramic vase filled with vomit. These childish beings are drowning, like elephants sinking in deep water. These childish beings are confined, like thieves in a dungeon. These childish beings are content, like a pig surrounded by filth. These childish beings are greedy, like a dog with a bone. These childish beings fall like moths flying into the candle flame. These childish beings are trapped like monkey tangled in a snare.
These childish beings are caught like fish snarled in a net. These childish beings are cut up like sheep on a slaughtering log. These childish beings are impaled like a criminal on the tip of a stake. These childish beings are sinking like an old elephant in a swamp. These childish beings perish like a ship wrecked on the ocean. These childish beings fall like a blind person tumbling into a deep abyss. These childish beings are exhausted like water running into the surface of the earth. These childish beings go up in smoke like the great earth at the end of the eon. These childish beings are spinning like the revolving of a potter's wheel. These childish beings have lost their way, like blind people roaming the mountains. These childish beings are tied up and run in circles, like dogs kept on a leash. These childish beings wither, like grasses and trees in the hot season. These childish beings diminish, like the waning moon during the dark fortnight. These childish beings are devoured, like snakes by the Garudas. These childish beings are swallowed like ships by huge sea monsters. These childish beings are robbed like a traveler by a horde of thieves. These childish beings are broken like palm trees in a storm. These childish beings are killed like someone bitten by a poisonous snake. These childish beings are wounded because of seeking a taste, like foods licking a knife smeared with honey. These childish beings are carried away like wooden logs taken off by the river. These childish beings play like children toying with their own excrement. These childish beings are controlled like elephants by a mahout's hook. These childish beings are deceived like a simple-minded person by a charlatan. These childish beings exhaust their roots of virtue like a gambler losing his wealth. These childish beings are devoured like merchants consumed by demonesses.
The Bodhisattva examined the retinue of consorts by means of these 32 similes. He contemplated the impure nature of the body and developed a feeling of repulsion and then disgust. Next, he meditated the fact that his own body was just like theirs, and so he truly saw the shortcomings of the physical body. Then he let go of his attachment toward the body, destroying his perception of it as being attractive, and instead seeing it as repulsive. He saw that the body, from the soles of the feet all the way up to the top of the head, is made of filth, produces filth, and emits filth. At that moment, he exclaimed the following verse: "Ground in the field of karma and born from the water of craving, we call it the transitory body. This body is moist from tears, sweat, and mucus, and filled with urine and blood. It is full of all kinds of filth, fat, pus, and brains. It constantly leaks excrement, and it stinks. It is made of bones, teeth, and hair, and is covered by hairy skin. Packed with intestines, liver, spleen, lymph, and saliva, it is weak. It is like a machine held together by bones and sinews and adorned with flesh. It is filled with diseases, subject to pain, and always afflicted by hunger and thirst. The body of beings has many cavities and transforms into old age and death. Seeing the body, what wise person could not think of it as an enemy? In this way, the Bodhisattva remained mindful of the body as something that must be left behind." You want me to read that last one there?
Yes, please.
Okay. The gods who were hovering in the sky above asked the god Dharmakaran, "Dear friend, what is this?" Siddhartha dawdles and keeps looking at the retinue of consorts. He even smiles and does not seem displeased, but perhaps he is like a deep ocean that cannot be fathomed. Because it is true that whoever is unattached does not cling to objects. Or will he perhaps forget the promise he made when he was inspired by the gods? The god Dharmakaran replied, "Why say something like that? There is surely evident that when he practiced awakened conduct in the past, he developed this kind of detachment. Why then would he all of a sudden become attached in this existence, which is his last?"
Okay, thank you. So would anybody like to comment, start a discussion on this section here? You know, starting off with the part where the Bodhisattva goes to see his father and let his father know that he was going to leave, and then conversation carries on. Does he seem like a person does the Bodhisattva seem like someone who is undecided?
No.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. I was just gonna say, I think that I think he's just trying to be respectful and kind and compassionate to another sentient being on the way, because he realized the suffering for his father, which is why he made that journey to have the conversation and be forthcoming and transparent. I found it very touching that he did that actually and didn't just leave.
What do you think about, that he kind of challenged his father, who was asking him not to go? But then the Bodhisattva challenged his father. Well, can you give me these boons? The boons are these blessings, the four blessings. So that was 15.8.
It was his way of explaining himself very clearly. That's why he was doing what he was doing.
Yeah. And then he goes on to support that by saying these were his vows from previous lifetime to be able to not be harmed by old age, not to be able to become sick, to remain healthy, to help beings, and so on, and to not have to face death. He goes on and he talks about that a little bit later. So the king finally gives his blessing in 15.11, I think. When the king heard these words from the best among men, he diminished his longing, let go of his attachments for his son, and said, then go and benefit and liberate beings. I rejoice in that. May all your wishes be fulfilled. So on one hand, he's trying to support the Bodhisattva to become enlightened and to help other beings, but then he does everything he can to kind of hold him back.
Lance, do we know any more about like his father's story, like King Sudahana? Do we know, like, I was just curious about his lineage and his background because I thought that was interesting, the conversation, and then what he actually did to stop him, like why he was holding on and grasping so much to the Bodhisattva in that way.
Well, I personally don't know anything more about it than what we're reading here, but to me, it kind of King Sudana kind of represents the establishment. Represents the lineage of the king and so on like that, and he was a traditionalist and he was trying to support that, but at the same time, he was very very impressed with his son, being the Bodhisattva. He acknowledged that his son was the Bodhisattva, but he still had this holding on to the old tradition.
As a dad who's just his oldest daughter is starting her second year in college, it can be really hard to say goodbye and to let your kids go into that next stage of their lives and have that independence. So to me, he's just like any other normal dad that loves his son and isn't ready to say goodbye yet. But maybe I'm projecting, but that's my take.
Well, no, that's pertinent. That's good. Gunga, what about you? Do you have any background information on King Sudana?
No, I don't have any background information on him. What I thought was interesting was that the four boons that the Bodhisattva asked for, be unharmed by old age, like a fine complexion, youth forever, healthy and without disease, life without death ever coming. That's the same boon that every person in America wants. We all still want that 2,000 years later, So it's the only thing, the rebirth again, is not part of our culture, but all the rest of that, I mean, it's completely, that's our culture is consumed with that. wanting to be young forever, not wanting to die, pretending that you're not growing old. So it's 2,500 years later, we're still dealing with the same stuff.
So, thinking about that, what's the choice? Does technology solve these problems, or do we have a higher purpose, and we just see the transitory nature of our lives, and we accept that nature, and allow ourselves to pass through it gracefully?
Yeah, I think that having a spiritual path that teaches to value this present moment, because like everything is impermanent and everyone is going to get old and die, and there's no really way around it. If we didn't have change, then there would be no birth either. So I think a spiritual path that promotes a way of dealing with that is much better than just trying to live in denial and Botox on your face and doing all these crazy things to your body because you think you'll be able to live forever. Or some people have their bodies frozen so that in the future someone else can wake them up, like rejuvenate them. So, and I also think it's better to consider this as the life that you have to live, and not consider that you're just going to be this life. Just live a good life now, and then after you die, your real life starts. I think I have a problem with that, always looking to the future, that idea that you're just living this life because this is, just living this hell on earth until you die, and then you'll be, in eternal bliss. That idea doesn't fit well with me either. Thank you.
Well, do you think that was a motivation of the Bodhisattva, or was his motivation to be able to be of benefit to beings in this life now? And that, he wasn't concerned about the next life so much.
Well, his final boon is he doesn't want to be born again. So yeah, it's all focused on this life. He wants to stop that reincarnation cycle. So I agree. I think he was focused on this life, not
and helping other beings. That his entire purpose was for the benefit of other beings. And then, the four boons that he was asking his father about were all about selfishness, to remain, healthy, and to remain, good looking, and to remain, without a disease, and as you just said, not to have to die, and so on. We're more selfish, that we're self-centered. But his motivation, the Bodhisattva's motivation, was for the benefit of other beings, and maybe he was looking for ways that he was going to do that. He would often, explain that. He would often say that, and these were his past vows. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I made these vows before. So I'm looking at, the text here, and then it goes on, that King Sudana's caste, his family, his clan is the Saki clan, and they're all coming together to support the king, to be able to support the idea of the lineage of the clan. They were trying to do that. And they said, oh, well, we'll send 500, warriors to each of these four gates to be able to keep the Bodhisattva inside the gates, not have to open up the gates and so on. So they're trying to preserve the status quo as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, I just don't think they get it. They just don't get that's an inevitability, right? They're all in kind of denial of what's actually going on.
Well, here's a question. After I read, these parts and everything, I made a note here, and my note is, can you see yourself as the Bodhisattva? Have you had experience, or thoughts or whatever, where you're kind of going against the status quo? You're going against what your family has thought that you should be, or even what you thought that you should be. But now you're at this crossroads where you're saying, wow, there's another way that I can live my life, and I really like to do that. And how can I do that and still be a noble person in the process of doing that? Have you had those kinds of thoughts?
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yes, I
Yeah,
have.
say, just moving forward on my path with Buddhism I've often felt like that at different times, that, this is like a rebellion against all of what our culture promotes, all the consumerism that is promoted in our culture, um, and just the values that are promoted in that culture. So yeah, I mean, you know, going to temple services, taking refuge vows, becoming a Dharma teacher, all those things, becoming a monk, changing my name. I mean, those all felt like that to me.
Brendan, you're rattling your head.
Well, I'm thinking because I was the firstborn, and us firstborns tend to be kind of go along to get along with whatever mom and dad want us to do. So maybe I'm generalizing, but it's hard for me. I really wasn't that rebellious. I pursued the kind of career eventually that my parents thought I should have, and have a pretty conventional bourgeoisie middle class existence. But I will be a little bit transparent here. We've all told our stories at times on this meeting. So I left Roman Catholicism a while back because there were just some concerns, some issues that I just didn't feel like it held the truth. And so, in that regard, embracing Tibetan Buddhism instead, and being on that Dharma path as an alternative, yeah, I think that's something that's somewhat of a maverick from what my family would do. Yes.
Zara, we've talked about this a little bit before, and the question I want to get to is, do you see this, do you regard this as a motivation that you have, or is it like a calling that you're responding to?
To just to clarify, like you mean to go the pathway of the Bodhisattva? Is that what you mean? Like a calling or response to something?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of different aspects to it, but on one level, you're going against the grain of what your family has established for you,
Yeah.
you know, and from another point of view, you can say, well, this is my life, and I've got, I'm grateful for what they've given me, but now I'm going to take it to another level. And then from yet another point of view, it could be that, here's this tractor beam that is pulling you, something is pulling you, and you feel that kind of subtle pressure of being pulled in a direction, and you're happy about it, but it presents problems in having to deal with it. So,
I think I have a responsibility, or at least I believe, to what I would call spiritually up level in the body I'm in right now. Like it's very clear to me, like it's my next step in my spiritual evolution. I don't doubt it at all. I don't feel like I do feel like it's like intuitively, it's like this deja vu thing. Like I've done this circle before. I keep saying break, finish the circle, go to something else. Certain types of like these like thought patterns that are now like sort of replacing unhealthy like Mara thought patterns, where it's like the circus show where I'm like, you've done this before, deja vu, right? So I almost feel like it's both of those things that you just described almost go hand in hand, like a left and right hand. Like there's probably a byplay between both where initially you're like, wait, something, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I want to do this. I want to be on this path. So maybe something inadvertently does start pulling you, and then you're like, find joy and like what we've called before the sufferfest, right? Like you have to find joy in ripping the band-aids, and then the motivation to be like, this is actually a way better way to live, trusting something much higher and purposeful than the cyclical existence of the ego drama. So I think it's, to answer your question directly, I think it's both of those together have to work hand in hand at some point. Unless you're just kind of born in at your reincarnation where you've already done all that up leveling and you are like, I'm like, you know exactly where you left off before. You're like, okay, I'm ready. This is the go around. At least for me in the body I'm in now, that wasn't immediately intuitive for me right away. It is now, but I definitely had to get a little bit, like what you said, that nudging and pulling. So that's a great question, Lance. I like that. It's very thought provoking, the way you asked it.
Do you see the déjà vu? I mean, do you feel like that, this is something that you've been round before?
Yeah. And yes, 100%. And like when you start dealing with each sort of, I call it the soap opera, like I've done that. So that relational soap opera, I've done that, whatever. And then you have to like go through, like, I think you have to go through you can't really emotionally bypass some of the realities. Like you have to cry, get angry, frustrated. And then once that subsides, then you're like, okay, I'm done with this cycle, right? Like it's making the decision to detox, from that. So yeah, the deja vu is obvious, but you know what is beautiful is like I'm able to recognize it and say, can you be done this time around? Can this band-aid be ripped? Can you be finished with that lesson, right? Can that karmic lesson be landed so there's no other action needed? Because there's so many other that I need to learn. I'm like, I've got a lot of accounts open that are in the red, Lance. So as soon as I can land one, as soon as some of that negative karma starts coming, the sooner I recognize it and say, like you say, contemplate. You have to do the contemplation. And I think that was one of the things, was trying to rush through the process also is not smart either. There's wisdom, and you have to actually feel the band-aid rip so it sticks. And I think that's the contemplation. That's if you need to cry, you need to be angry. And then just make that definitive decision that you're done with that, that cycle. But it definitely does feel like deja vu. I don't know if that's relatable to Kunga or Brendan, but gosh, there's a couple things where I'm just like, why am I back here again?
Well, let's ask Kunga and Brendan the same question. Kunga, what would you say? Those questions that I asked Zara. Was it your own motivation? Was it something that you were being pulled, a calling to do this? What would you say about that?
I guess pulled. I don't know. If for me, it's at this point, it just like seems like the most important thing to do. I'm very dedicated to the practice. I don't know where that dedication comes from. I think it just accumulated over time. It just came more and more interested and got more and more out of my practice. So now it kind of dominates my life all the time when I'm awake. But I don't have to remotivate myself. It's just kind of there. So I guess it could be like something pulling you. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm being pulled. It just seems like that's the most important thing to do right now for me. And so it's not hard to find time to do it.
Thank you. Brendan, what about you? What do you think about that?
Well, if the question is, do I feel like, do I have any memory or knowledge of my past lives? The answer is absolutely not. I'm just not one of these people that has that gift or I haven't reached the level where I can think that way. But if the question's what's pulling me into the Dharma path? Is that part of the question?
Well, is it your own motivation? Is it a calling? Are you Is it like a tractor beam that is pulling you in a direction, or somebody's behind you kind of pushing you? Is there a deja vu? Is that what you were just saying, that there's no deja vu there? But
Yeah.
what is it that's here now then, that is the force, the energy that is moving you in this direction?
When I was a young recent college graduate, there's a job that I desperately wanted so badly, and I didn't get it. And the circumstances under which I didn't get it, I considered the time to be highly unfair. Now, I don't really think as much in terms of fairness or unfairness, but I was young, okay? And there was a book I picked up on the bookshelf, and there was a quote from Arthur Schopenhauer, great German philosopher, and he said, "We would be well to think of this life as a disengagio, or a process of disengagement, because that's what everything we will experience is designed to teach us." And the light bulb went off. I mean, it was just like, wow, what I'm going through now is, it gave me a context I just could never have imagined previously. And then over the years, I started to learn that actually that Schopenhauer was something of a Buddhist, and that in the Dharma path, there's a lot more content than just that one quote. That in the Dharma path, we continue to learn things, and we're able to see the truth. We're able to see the point. And so how can I not follow the Dharma path? Because my lived experience has put me on that path. And from a young age, there's been a fascination with the East and with China and with the Buddha. So I think that they all kind of combine, so to speak.
Well, if you don't mind, let me ask this question of you,
Yeah.
because you were a strong Catholic, if I understood, things that you said in the past, and let's just, cut it down to not so much the Catholicism or even the Christianity, but a strong sense of spirituality.
Yes, at times, certainly. And it's come and gone. Like when I graduated college, I was pretty much an agnostic, then had kids, got back into the church. So it's ebbed and flowed. But yes, there's always been a fascination with the mysterious, and Plato in the cave, right? And seeing the shadows and trying to figure out what's making them, and why is there something rather than nothing, which, by the way, the Buddha would probably say is a dumb question to ask. We just accept that it is. But yeah, I mean, there's always been a spiritual sense of fascination with the unknown and mysterious. It's probably the best way I can put it.
So does the Dharma offer a different articulation, or what does the Dharma offer that maybe the brand of spirituality that you came from didn't? Or do you see that there's a similarity, and you're not you can move in either direction at this point?
My daughter, Elizabeth, who you met, Lance, she likes you a lot. One of the things she likes about you is when she watches this, she sees that you don't criticize other faiths, right? You try to be very accepting of all faiths, and she considers that a very big strength in you. So I'm going to try to model your behavior, okay? And I'm going to try to, not attack my old religion, but I will talk about some of the differences. And I do not believe that there will be a judgment in which Jesus will come down on a cloud. I do not believe that we will all bodily resurrect from the dead. I do not believe in that type of dogma. I've abandoned monotheism because I simply don't believe it to be the truth. So, and there's other things I don't really want to get into, but there's other things that I also I did not find I was finding the truth in that belief system. And one of the attractive things about Buddhism is it's not a dogmatic faith. There is no dogma. The Buddha never compelled anyone to come to the Sangha. And the Buddha said, if this doesn't work for you, then do what works for you. I'm not here to convert you. I'm not here to force you to do anything. And I know there's others in the group that have left the monotheistic belief system behind. And I think that it's probably for some other reasons, I would think. So not trying to attack, but trying to contrast a little bit to answer the question. And I've even read stuff that, maybe Jesus was actually a Buddhist, that in Egypt he'd been I mean, when you read the Sermon on the Mount, it certainly sounds kind of Buddhist, doesn't it? So maybe he was influenced somehow by Buddhist teaching. We just don't know. I don't want to say that's the case, because I really don't know.
Okay.
I wasn't there.
Right. Well, you said something else that was interesting, and I'd like to circle back to you, but I'd like to give Zara an opportunity to speak, and Kunga, and then come back to you on this topic. But I think if I can paraphrase what you said, was something like, we have, these set of circumstances that we have to kind of satisfy in this lifetime. We come with these, these problems, unsolved problems, whatever. And now we have to go through, the causes of those problems, the conditions of those problems, and have to deal with those problems. So to me, I would explain that like karma. We have the karma that we're bringing with us, with this bag of karma that we have. And now we have these causes and conditions in this life to be able to deal with it. And what are we trying to do to deal with it is to ultimately diffuse it, or to neutralize it, to make it no karma, So Zara, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I that's what you just said about, yeah, that's 100% how I would have, not as beautifully and cohesively described it, but yes, I think the goal is to get to a state of there's no action needed, there's no compulsion to act, because you can recognize the interconnectedness, or there's the true understanding of experiential non-duality when you're in that true flow state where everything is just one solid sort of energy, and there's no divisiveness, it's complete unification and every single layer of matter. And so like you recognize all of it as an illusion, even the need to do a kind action. Doing the kind action is better than doing a bad action, but even the kind action generates karma. So I completely agree with what you just said, and I'm hopeful to get to that place of recognizing the negative karma patterns driven by ego, then transferring them to positive, and then ultimately to not needing to act at all. Because I do think, Lance, even the need to do good karma is subtly motivated by ego. Or it can be deceptively motivated by ego. It takes a lot of work to be truly aware at all times of service to others before self, which is the ego. To know, is this action not producing more karma because it truly is first and foremost for the well-being of someone else before my own needs? And then it will not accumulate karma in that way, even though, because we are compelled in our human bodies to take action. You have to go pee, you have to eat, you have to sleep. Those are actions. So the body itself requires action. So those are my thoughts on it. And I think that what I just said really is the hardest part for most of us to get to, is knowing, am I taking this action first and foremost to reduce the suffering of someone else? Even like right now I'm with my sister. I'll give you an example right now. And there's a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with how she parents her kids, like different ways I would do things. And then I just recognize there's certain things that, yes, you should say something right now, and then no, don't say anything, right? Like if I'm like, oh, like I can see the sufferfest coming for them versus my ego needing to say it out of pride, if that makes sense, needing to say, well, I would do it this way, blah, 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 because, versus, hey, let's do it this way because that actually is going to be best for 7 of the 10 people in the room, right? Meaning I'm trying to reduce their suffering. It's not about my pride. So like right now I'm practicing that actively as we speak on this trip, which is actually beautiful because I'm doing what all this training is for in person in very difficult, previously would have been difficult circumstances. Now I'm just like, everyone else can win. I don't need to win. Does that make sense? The trip I'm on now would have been hard a couple of years ago. Like I would have been constantly frustrated, Lance, because I would have been annoyed at my sisters behavior patterns. Now I'm not. I'm just not. I'm like, she's suffering. I see her as someone who's suffering and doing the best she can. So unless my action needs to happen, they can do what they need to do unless I need to take an action that is genuinely for the benefit of the family. Like, it's going to be in their best interest if I speak up and say something. So I hope it's helpful.
Well, I think something that you said early in your comments there was very profound, because it was based on the idea of realizing that when we do things for the benefit of others, there's a purity pathway to that keeps us from, being egocentric and so on, doing it for our own good and so on. And really, that's the realization of the Mahamudra. You go through these stages of the Mahamudra. The Mahamudra is the meditation that you go through to purify and so on. And then the result of that becomes the realization that we're doing this, that we need to dedicate this, that our life is for the benefit of others, and that's what keeps us pure. If we're really dedicated, we're really working at that and so on. And it requires a constant review. It's not something that we can take for granted. We need to keep working at that. As long as we're breathing human beings, we're susceptible to corruption. And so the path of being a bodhisattva is that kind of a path. That there's a path to purity, but the purity isn't realized until it's until you can be that embodiment. It's where is that? Is there a threshold for that? Or is it here? And that's I guess that's a fundamental question for everybody. So maybe Kunga has a comment on that. What do you think about this, Kunga?
Thank you. So in Zen, the focus really is on recognizing that the self is a delusion. So when karma happens, it's no worries, because there's no one really there who's it's happening to. I mean, you're experiencing the feelings and the experience, but you're not attaching to it, because you know that there's no person, there's no permanent self there receiving these karmas. So it's kind of like holding loosely, to things. I think that's the idea. And I think the one of the ideas is that by experiencing the activity without attaching to it or pushing it away or ignoring it, then you can formulate a response, a direct response that will be as karmically neutral as it can be, I guess. Just like, the response that's needed in the relative world, but not necessarily a response that's going to, create problems or more difficulties, more suffering for yourself or others. I think, sometimes you don't know what that is right away. You can't think it through. You just have to feel it. But that's what it made me think about when we started talking about karma and how it affects us. If we can remember that, this, and the Buddha also taught, I think, that karma came from volitional actions. And there's an example of like a child who hits another child that's not creating karma for that child, because they don't hold on to it. They did it unthinkingly, and then they just moved on to keep playing with the kid. There's a certain idea that things you do without thought, automatic, or I hate the word to use habitual, because I feel like we do lots of habitual things that are harmful. But this idea that there are things that you can do that don't really hold karmic weight because of the intention that you have. That's all I got.
Well, I think that's very good. And I think, the point that you started off, quoting or paraphrasing, the Zen aspect of this, was very good. and to be able to get to the point, that there's nothing, that is going to be the result of this or something like that, and is that something that stays with you? Is that something that you've learned, or is that something that you recognized for yourself and then discovered it here in context, in from a teacher or from a book or something like that?
I wouldn't say it's something I discovered myself. It's something I hear about in Soto Zen teachings all the time, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, and actually, it's not an aspiration. It's an aspiration to move towards. I don't think it's something that I do myself on a regular basis. I think I have a personality that is a more laid back, non-reactive personality, but that's something I was born with, and that's not because of my Buddhism studies. I think that helps my Buddhist studies, but that experience of no self, I think I still have a very strong ego. Yeah, thank you.
So this is a question for everybody, and Bernie, thank you for coming, to us and everything. And I'm sorry we're kind of in the middle of this, but maybe you can pick up the gist of our conversation. We're talking about chapter 15, leaving home, and just in the first couple pages, is what we're talking about. And another aspect of this is, did the Bodhisattva, was he acting out of his karma? In other words, did the Bodhisattva have karma? Was his life shaped by karma? And he's living this out.
Well, according to the story, he is, because they said this is his last lifetime, and he's got to fulfill his karma by leaving home. And the gods are discussing, why are you doubting him? Don't you know he experienced this in the past, and he's already been awakened, and he already foresaw the whole life before him when he was up in the heaven before coming down. So I think the way the story portrays it, yeah, definitely, there's that direction that's been set up through karma for him to go through. But I think the Buddha, I don't know. I mean, it seems like karma affects all beings. There's no way to escape karma.
Anybody else got a comment on that?
What Zara said about what she's doing really hit home for me. I think that's a beautiful thing, being there and really trying to walk that line and be a positive influence, but not get negative also. And that I just think that's really cool what she's doing and how she explained it.
Thank you, Brendan. That's really sweet. It's a blessing to have a large family because I think it does help you resolve karma more quickly, and also not running away from relationship struggles. Kunga, to answer your question, I don't believe you can escape karma. I think there's an internal accountant, an internal auditor that keeps score, and sometimes it's faster ripening, sometimes it's slower, and sometimes it's more the volume of it or intensity, it just depends. Like if you hit someone, you may get hit back right away, like in seconds later, or you may get hit by a car a week later. So I don't think that it is, because then the lesson isn't learned from the ego, like the rushing or like, why did you end up doing that? So I think until the lesson is learned, then you're able to be more thoughtful in future actions. That goes back to not accumulating karma, because kind of like what Lance said a few moments ago, where you have to be very thoughtful when you're on this path every 24 hours to really, actually every action is like, am I doing this because of some subtle ego need, or is this really about the suffering and well-being of the other person? It's a struggle for me daily to keep going back. Like, I'm happy to do it, but it's a struggle to go through the process and delineate every action. But I don't think you can escape karma. I think it accumulates and then it ripens, depending. And it may not ripen in the body we're in now. It may be like something from a while ago, like in another body or another lifetime.
I remember years ago sitting in a teaching, kind of a Lama teaching, and the thought came to mind. I don't know if it came to my mind or the Lama brought it up, but it had something to do with, um, the purity of the Buddha. And was the Buddha born with that purity, or did he have to, for lack of a better word, kind of earn it? Did he have to work at it and so on? But at the same time, regardless of how much he had to work at it, he was bringing some karma into his life with him. And that's what we don't see. They say, well, only a Buddha can see that karma, can see all those seeds and so on like that. So, I don't know how specific that is. I don't know if that's an allusion to say that, a Buddha could do that or not, I don't think, well, anyway, but my point is, it's like the proverbial iceberg. You see the iceberg above the surface of the water, but you don't realize that there's this huge mass of ice that you don't see that is below the water. So that peak that we see is what is present now, the life that we have now. We see that, but we don't see all that stuff at the bottom and so on. And we can't, negate that. But at the same time, we can't try and hold on to it either. We have to appreciate it for what it is and be able to say, okay, now we just have to deal with this peak right now and not let it be to use that analogy, for it to break off and then cause more harm, by wrecking another ship or melting and raising the water level in the ocean so that cities begin to be submerged or something like that. So anyway, it's just the point that we may not recognize the karma that brought us to where we are, and to accept everybody at that level. Not to try and analyze where they came from, just know that they came from someplace, and it has caused them to be who they are to some degree, and what they do to circumvent, to navigate through those causes, through the conditions that they have in their lives and so on, is where we could say the holiness is, or the nobility is, or the tragedy is, whichever path a person takes, or the combination of things. So I think we've said enough that maybe Bernie would have something to add to the conversation. Bernie, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
Karma is a very deep and supposedly the most difficult topic to talk about. The question always is, how many of our actions are determined by karma and how many are actually free? And it's not an answer. I don't have an answer to that. I suspect now fewer than we usually think. So, talking about ordinary people, about the Bodhisattva, it's usually explained that the Bodhisattva is guided to Buddhahood by the aspirations that he made in previous life. And there are many prayers which are recorded, which are like the aspirations of Maitreya or the aspirations of Samantabhadra, which is when they were on the Bodhisattva path, they made aspirations on how they would perform once they became enlightened. And the distinction between the different Buddhas is really the distinction between the different aspirations they made when in previous lives. So in that sense, you could say that at least you could say that it's the actions of the Bodhisattva are determined by karma, but in this case, the karma is that set their behavior is the aspirations that they made. Now, generally, it's also explained that, and this is all book stuff. I can't say in reality what it said, but in the scriptures, what it says, that all Buddhas' careers are pretty much the same, and they all have pretty much the same actions in their life. They are born into a whatever caste is considered highest at the time when they are born, and they have to decide to leave home, and there's a resistance to it. So there's supposedly a karma or a pattern of behavior that's common to all the Buddhas in their various lives. But there are variations, of course, too, and those variations are set by their aspiration prayers. So I've never seen an aspiration prayer for Shakyamuni, but I'm sure that somewhere it exists. Somebody has written down what aspirations he made in his previous life. So that's all I really have to say on the subject of karma and the life of the Bodhisattva.
All right, very good. Thank you. And that opened the door to this next thing. So through these couple pages that we've been reading, the dynamic has been between the Bodhisattva, the king, and the king's family, the Sakya clan. In other words, ordinary human beings. But then when we get to about 1523 in the text here, then it shifts up a notch, and they start talking about the gods and the I'm sorry, wait a minute. The Yaksa generals, the four great kings. They start talking about the four great kings, which are, on a mandala, they're spiritual beings and so on. And then they start questioning, well, what is the Bodhisattva? What is he really doing and so on? And is he honoring what Bernie just said? Is he honoring his past aspirations? And it comes down to the point where the Bodhisattva responds in 1529, 15.29, 1530, 1531 are the four aspiration prayers of the Bodhisattva. It's right here in the text. So it says, first, I've seen how sentient beings suffer, so may I free and liberate those who are bound to the world and caught in the prison of cyclic existence. May I liberate sentient beings from the tight shackles and chains of craving. So that was his number one aspiration. And the second one was 1531, where he says, I shall shine the light of Dharma for those who are thrown deep into the darkness of great ignorance within the world, for the people whose eyes are obscured. So he's bringing the light of the Dharma. He's drawing attention to it. He's not creating it, but he's pointing out to those who don't see it and say, oh, well, this is yours too. You just need to open yourself up to the light of the Dharma. And that was his great gift, that the prior Buddhas who appeared, they were telling of the situation, but they weren't offering the gift of recognizing it for yourself. Then the next one is 15.32 is to 1532 is to overcome pride. This was his aspiration, to help beings to overcome their pride. And then the last one was 15.33 was to show, to demonstrate, to give permission for beings to be tranquil, to have tranquility in their lives, to have peacefulness in their lives, to allow themselves to withdraw from the constant drama that's going on and so on, and be able to abide that drama through their own tranquility. They're not going to be able to stop it, but they're going to be able to abide through it and not be upset by it. So those were the four aspirations of the Bodhisattva that the gods now are engaging with the Bodhisattva to say, well, what's your motivation? Why are you doing this? He's saying, well, here are my four aspirations that I made, before I was even born. Any comments on that? And I guess the question should be, have you ever felt anything like that yourself? Do you feel like you're trying to correct mistakes, either within yourself? I guess it has to be within yourself, but then to be able to illuminate that for other beings, that they may see that themselves. Congo, what do you think?
When I give Dharma talks at the temple, I'm usually trying to look at some way that I experience the world, which is great suffering because it's ignorant. It has some misconceptions incorporated into it. Like recently, I talked about the first precept, not to kill, and talked about the idea that physically killing is one way to think about it. Think about how we kill things in life. We might have a job that requires us to kill in self-defense, or for a soldier or something. We can think about how we kill with our diets, eating living things, and how we really can't get away from that, because everything has to eat in order to live. Everything has to consume. Even if we're just consuming plants, we're still, they're living organisms as well. And then I talked about this idea that when we meet people and we assume things about them, or we stereotype them, we make judgments about them without really knowing what's going on. We're kind of killing who they actually are. We're just replacing who they are with our own thoughts and perceptions. So yeah, I guess that's when I do that. I do that I have some students that I get comments on their journals, and I try and help them look at ways maybe where they could think differently about how they're perceiving the world. So yeah, that's where I see myself doing that kind of thing. And then I think just when I try to learn it, to present it, then it helps me to ingrain it a little bit more. So then it becomes a little bit more active in my own life as well. I can keep that teaching in there and trying to actualize it every day. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Brendan, you have a comment about that?
You had mentioned, Lance, one of the four things that the Bodhisattva had said, and it was about leading people to be able to live a life of tranquility. I think that was the fourth one that you mentioned.
That's 15.33.
Yeah. Oh, I went too far back. That's why I couldn't find it. Okay, here it is. Yeah. May I show them the Dharma of tranquility, which brings fulfillment through knowledge. So, I, in my middle age, am constantly seeking tranquility. So, I go to work, I do my job. I'm here as a servant for my kids to help them, for my wife. But, when I have some downtime, I ask myself, are you actively pursuing tranquility? Watching a exciting football game once in a while might be fun, but it's not pursuing tranquility. There's other ways to do that. And this reminds me of something that's been on my mind for many, many months that I've wanted to ask about. So, how does someone whose husband is beating her up find tranquility? How does someone in a war zone right now find tranquility? And maybe I'll ask a better question. It's a hard question. I read this story in India where there were these farmers, and there was this big company that swept in, wanted to take their land away. but they didn't really want them to get upset about it. So they had this kind of collusion where they were going to give them antidepressants. So they wouldn't be sad about losing their land, right? So, so, and if I were to say to them, well, you just need to meditate more, or take more antidepressants, that really wouldn't be a very charitable or reasonable thing. So I guess what I'm saying are, if someone's a victim, right? I guess we're all victims at some point, but if someone's a victim, is it their job? Is it their fault because of karma? And is it their job to kind of figure their way out of it through the Dharma path? Or at some point, do we have to say, you really shouldn't be beating your wife up? So I know that's a very complicated question, but it's something I've been pondering a lot. I really don't have a very good answer to it. So that's what I thought when you were going over that, Lance.
Well, yeah, that's a good web you got there. That's
A lot to unpack, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and it's something that we should all get into, and now's not the time. We don't have enough time to go into that, but you can take it apart and start looking at the different aspects of that, and not the least of which, was your comment about, what can we do to distract people from what maybe their intended purpose is by giving them some kind of drug or obscuration or something, and somebody said, I don't know if it's a paraphrase, but that religion is the opiate of the people.
Karl Marx, yeah.
He said that?
Marx,
yeah.
Yes.
And it's not too much different what, Mao Zedong said to the Dalai Lama and so on. The religion is poison. And I know that, maybe it's, I don't want to controversy or whatever, or conspiracy or something. They said in 1945 Japan, the government was supplying the people, the populace, with all these antidepressants and drugs and so on, because there was such a community of people that were so depressed of having lost the war and so on. So they were trying to control the people with these drugs and so on. And then even in modern day, in our modern day, the CIA was supposedly, it's been claimed that they were supplying drugs to San Francisco in 1967 as an experiment to see how they can control this population, and that the flow of crack and things like that came later on was a way to be able to control these people that, otherwise would be rising up and rioting. They're giving them these drugs to suppress them. So my point here is saying that, are these conspiracies, do we fall under the pressure of these conspiracies to be able to not take responsibility for the things that we really need to do and so on?
Thank you. That's helpful. My personal opinion is whatever life is throwing at you, no matter how awful it is, if it's to be, it's got to be me. I mean, it's my job to, on one hand, personally, it's my job to try to fix it and get out of that bad situation, whatever it is. But on the other hand, we also have to, if someone's committing a grave injustice, as Buddhists, we can't be silent about that either. So it's kind of, I guess, to me, it's both. Is the answer.
Yeah, and there's a very political, drama that's going on in the whole world right now, that really shows that, is what's happening. Zara, you have any comment on this? Maybe we've gone a little bit off of on a tangent here, but I think it's a useful conversation to be talking about, the aspirations of the Bodhisattva, and have you shared these aspirations? Do you feel these yourself? And Have they been motivators for you?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, they have been motivating for me, and I do morally and ethically and spiritually have a commitment to those every day. Like every day I get up and during my devotional spiritual time frame each morning, which includes meditation and recitation of, prayers, I do ask for, I just, the universe or whoever, just to guide my action in a way that is for me, becoming more truthful to those aspirations, but also inspiring others. So I ask for whatever, karma needs to ripen, either positive or negative for the day, that I accept it joyfully. Um, and that also, if there's anything that my actions need to do for others, that if I need to act, I will act in the best interest for those others, and I will accept whatever karma, positive or negative. So yes, absolutely. For me, it's a daily morning check-in, and it's an evening check-in with myself, as well as I meditate and close my day out with evening meditations and AM and PM now, as part of growing and evolving, and spending more time inward and only going outward as necessary. I would say yes to that. It's for me like a lifestyle now.
So to try and pull that together with what you each said was every one of us is trying to create some kind of a mindfulness out of this, and sometimes it's going to be a whole lot right, sometimes it's going to be a whole lot wrong, but there's a mindfulness that there's a process in place, and we're trying to understand that process and use the process to figure this out for ourselves and navigate our way through this. So let me come to Bernie, and do you have a comment on this, Bernie?
Well, back to the original question, if you're in a dangerous situation, the first thing you have to do is get out of it. Obviously, you can't practice unless you have some sort of tranquil situation, or unless you're a very advanced practitioner. It's like the Tibetans who went to India. They had to get out of a very dangerous situation. Or the people in Florida now who are going to have to get out of the path of the hurricane. If somebody's in an abusive relationship, their first job is to get out of that abusive relationship. And that's just common sense. Once you get out of the relationship, you have to heal the trauma which came from that problem. And for that, certainly meditation can be helpful. I'm not sure I have anything more. I mean, the question seemed, I've heard the kind of question before, and the idea that Buddhism is meant just to keep you quiet in difficult situations, I don't believe that that's true. I don't recall ever in the Buddhist scriptures the Buddha saying, well, if you're in an abusive relationship, it's better to stay there and practice, or if the king is oppressing you, you have to put up the king's oppression. That just generally doesn't come up. The Buddhist solution to all these problems typically was to leave home and become a monk or a nun. So that basically meant to get out of whatever terrible situation you were in into the monastic order, which would be a better situation and a situation more conducive to practice. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anything more to be said on this subject than that.
That's helpful. Very helpful. Thank you.
So then we come to this next section that we were reading, and one of the gods, Dharma Karan, then is able to make the consorts, the harem of the Bodhisattva, all these very desirable women, start looking grotesque and aging and going through all kinds of different moving away from their beauty and into the human the human filth that we smell. We have excrement, and people become to be recognized with that rather than all the coverings up that they do to appear very, very nice and appealing and so on. So this God is making all these women be very unappealing. So this can be a metaphor. It doesn't have to be women. It can be women and men. It can be human beings. It can be, the life experience is being this way. And then the Bodhisattva, then it comes to the Bodhisattva, and he begins to recognize this and sees all this as childish beings, sees that this is the behavior or whatever of all childish beings. And then he goes on and lists these 32 similes that begin at 15.43 and go on through 15.46, all these similes. And these childish beings and how they behave, what they do, are caught up, how they're caught up and so on like that. And so this is very interesting, I think, because it gives us cause to be able to recognize how we've been trapped in one way or another and see through, the facades that other people have created. They may put on the makeup, they may put on really nice clothes, they may be living in very nice houses and have very responsible jobs, but they're acting like childish beings, And so this insight that the Bodhisattva is revealing is saying, hey, this is where danger is, and we need to recognize that this is our life. We have a potential for this. We have a potential for our Buddha nature, but without that, we have this very, very strong potential to become like a child and live like a child with all this negativity and disgust and so on. And my favorite one has to be at the very bottom, third or fourth up from the bottom of 1546. It says, "These childish beings are deceived, like simple-minded person by a charlatan." And that's, we see that, we've seen it always in the world, but right now it's really, it is so naked. We're seeing the choices, and you can be on either side of the choice and say, well, that other side there is being led by a charlatan. And that's why the chasm is there, because both sides are making compelling arguments against the other side and so on. But and we, the ordinary human beings, are like children, not able to be able to discern where the truth is, what the reality, what's the criteria that we use to judge our direction. Which way are we going to go? And it's up to us to be able to do that, to take responsibility for that. Konga, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like the 32 similes a lot. I thought they're very, very easy to imagine and feel those experiences. I'm sure that I've experienced all of these, in my life, being trapped, being greedy, being felt like I was trapped or caught or cut up or impaled or sinking, all these things. They're great, similes for different emotions we experience in life when we're disappointed or we don't get what we want, or when we're trying to get something we think we need, or we're trying to hold on to something we have, trying to get away from something we don't like. So I really enjoyed that that section. As far as the simile, that simile with the fools and a charlatan. Yeah, and I guess the charlatan is our own ego that wants to tell us that we're a separate permanent being from the rest of the universe and doesn't see that interconnection that we have with everything else. That's the big, lie that we bought into. Our senses kind of reinforce it because we see ourselves as separate bodies. We only feel what's going on in our bodies. We don't feel what's going on in the other person's body. We think that we have our different perspective just because we have eyes in this body and we walk around and we only see things from this perspective. So we have all these physical things that reinforce that feeling of separateness. But I think that's the big thing that we're trying to overcome. We're trying to see that. And I think when Brendan mentioned the woman and her karma and being an abusive position, being abused, that, sure, that's her karma, that, her parents, her parents brought her up in a certain way and she experienced certain relationships and certain conditions that caused her to be in that terrible situation. But it's not only her karma, it's her parents' karma, it's the karma of the abuser, it's the karma of the society that she comes out of that permits that kind of thing to happen. It's part of our society. So as long as we're promoting that society, we're sharing in that karma as well. Thanks.
Brendan?
Well, Lance, you shared your favorite passage, so I will share mine. The body is moist from tears, sweat, and mucus, and filled with urine and blood. It is full of all kinds of filth, fat, pus, and brains. It constantly leaks excrement and it stinks. And the reason why that is my favorite is because I'm a married man, and when I go to the grocery store, sometimes I'll see attractive women who I'm not married to. I'll see attractive women jogging down the road. And if I went up to each of them and gave them my phone number, my wife would not be very happy with me. And I don't think they'd be very happy with me either. And so one thing that I have learned is that if you want to really avoid those types of temptations, you need to see things as they really are. We are very good at human beings about dressing nice and doing our hair nice and everything. And on Instagram, we look very pretty. But we also need to remember the reality of, what's really going on in our intestines. And if you kind of see warts and all, it kind of keeps you on the straight and narrow. And that's one thing that I learned from my Catholic friends, is that you must see things as they are. You must, the more you engage in a fantasy world, the more down the bad path you go. So I'm going to say, Bernie, it's like Thomas Merton, right? For me, it's just a progression. So I'm going to be non-dualistic here and not compare the two faiths. I'm just going to say it's just a progression from one to the other, which is less dualistic. So that's all I have, Lance.
Very good observation. Thank you. Zara, would you like to comment?
Well, I was just going to say, Brendan, that was actually really beautiful. After reading that passage in chapter 15, I literally was like, wow, like that really is like a huge Band-Aid rip and wake up call reading that section over and over. And if you really contemplate that, even meditate on it, it really is effective quickly in helping you realize the illusory, like the body's actually very gross. And it's kind of comical, all the drama that it produces for us, and it's so gross. And I kind of started contemplating that for myself and for others. And I was like, you really have to love someone at a deeply spiritual level, profoundly, regardless of their physical structure and your own. And that's really absolute and unconditional love. But yeah, that was a very effective passage for me. I contemplated that and I was like, yeah, the body is really gross and highly deceptive, regardless of what you like. Like Brendan, I think that's beautiful the way, and I'm not married, but I literally, as a single female, I look at men, it just all of it. And I'm like, I see it for what it is, kind of like the show of it. And very effective. I don't know if that's a perfect translation of how it was actually written in the original text, but it was effective for me, Lance, immediately. to kind of give me like a reality check. So,
Very good. Thank you. Good observation. Good mindfulness. Bernie?
Well, this comes up, I mean, this is one of the themes of, at least it's very common in Hinayana Buddhism, is the repulsive aspect of the human body. And there's various ways to demonstrate it. For instance, if you were in a restaurant and you found just one or two body hairs in the meal that you were served, you would say, no, this is repulsive. I can't eat this. You know, it's a tiny little piece of hair, but you see it in your food. Say, no, I can't eat that because it's so repulsive. So the truth is that what we take as attractive or repulsive really comes down to our mental processes, you know, to see something as attractive or to see it as repulsive. It really depends on us. And we never realize how contradictory and arbitrary our opinions on the subject are. In one situation, we could see something as very attractive, whereas in another situation, we would see exactly the same thing as very repulsive. So what I get from that is really not that it's inherently repulsive or inherently attractive, but it all depends upon our mental processes. And we decide more or less arbitrarily to take something as attractive or repulsive. Now, obviously, you can't push that too far because we've all got a genetic tendency to see certain, you know, we're all men and women and we see things as attractive or repulsive based on our biology. But to a large extent, we can realize that our opinions about these things are dependent on our mental setting and our mental, I don't know what the right word is in terms of psychology, but our mental position that we take at that particular time. Our framing, I think, might be the right word. So yeah, that's how I understand all these sort of things.
Well, very good. Well, thank you all very much. This was a very good conversation, I think, as usual. And I like, you know, this section ends in 15.51 by the gods questioning whether the Bodhisattva, how detached or attached he is, questioning that. And then the Dharmakaran, the god Dharmakaran then gives a reply about the awakened conduct of the Bodhisattva. So I'm not going to go into a detail about it now, but I invite you to read it a few times, 3 or 4 or 5 times, and just let that sink in a little bit. You know, the question of the attachment and the detachment, and how, you know, where's the dynamism there, and how do we navigate through that? You know, this is all about process, isn't it? That's what, you know, Bernie just used the word process, and we brought it up a little while ago. It's about process of purification, of being able to recognize not just your body as being, you know, impure, but the collective body as being, you know, this potential of impurity, but we purify it through our state of mind, through our attitude, through our, you know, our being able to transform this and being detached in that whole process. And if there's an attachment, to understand what's the degree of attachment and what's the practical purpose of that, and is that viable? Is that something that's valid? And being able to put all that together, because we're still living, breathing human beings. And this whole thing is the human being story. A Buddha is a human being. So, unless somebody has something burning that you'd like to end it with?
No, I got nothing more to say. typically this is the end of my day, so my brain power is kind of low, running low. So
Well, you did a good job. So we'll do a short dedication. I'm going to, if you got your red book, if you go to page 33 for just a moment, because at the bottom of page 33 is this very short 4-line prayer that says, Bodhicitta,
yeah,
the excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So contemplate what bodhicitta is and apply it to this prayer. And think about that bodhicitta is the mind of the holy enlightened beings. So then the Dekorma prayer on 35. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikompa Ratna Shri and all the other great masters, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Sarva Mangalam. May all be auspicious. Until the end of samsara. Does that mean the world ends? Or does it mean your suffering ends? Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much. And I like your skeleton shirt there.
I'm full on ant mode for the benefit of all little nieces and nephews. All the joyfulness.
Okay,
Thank
very good. All right. Thank you.
you, Lance.
Good to see you all. All right. See you soon.
Later.
Okay.